I am working on trying to get these shocks to fit. I keep running up against issues over and over. First, to start with, the shocks that I ordered, the 16-inch Fox shocks, I ended up getting some shocks that showed up. However, they weren't the 16s that I thought I ordered. I made a mistake when I ordered them, and they ended up sending me some 8.5 ones. So I made a mistake when I ordered them. That's my fault. I sent them back. The vendor told me they would let me credit that money towards another purchase, which is fine. I'll probably just order rims out of it because I wanted to get the 16-inch shocks. The vendor told me that they've had these shocks on order, the 16s, since October, and they don't expect them to come in till August. So I just keep running into challenges like that, getting parts. The good news is my Atlas transfer case is supposed to ship soon. So that's the good news. That's supposed to ship here in a week. So I'll be able to keep moving forward there and get some of the interior finished. So that's going to be on its way. That's good. That's right. So I've got these 18-inch Fox coilovers I got laying around. I didn't want to use them because 18 is really long. They're hard to package. The body is, look at how long it is. So, but what I might do is I might just end up using these and just trying to get by with them. Maybe it'll sit a couple inches higher than I originally planned, but I think I could make them work. So that's what I'm going to do. And what I might do is if they have too much travel, I may use just kind of limit straps to limit them to a place where the driveline and stuff doesn't bind too much. Because I wasn't planning on using shocks that long. So this is the challenge, is getting these to fit with this much steering. Every time I think I got it in a place that I like, I end up with like the tire hitting the shock or the shock hitting the chassis right here. I'm kind of at the point right now where I'm probably just going to cut these lower tubes off. I'm just going to cut those off and put the shock where it fits without hitting the tire, and then go back and then just replace these tubes where they fit around the shock. The reason why is I like the shocks to kind of be inboarded like this. I don't want them sticking out here, kind of out in the open. I like the way they look when they're nice and inboarded into the chassis. It just looks nice. It looks clean. It's a nice way of doing it, so that's kind of what I'm leaning towards right now. That's why I can't move these shocks further this way. When I flex it out over here, the shock starts getting pulled into this lower bar. And I'm just at the point now where I'm just going to cut that lower bar off and just make these fit where they'll fit and deal with that lower bar later. Because I just want these to be nice and clean. I don't want to just like take some sort of shortcut that I regret in the long run. Because when you put the shocks out here, sometimes when you roll and stuff, it's just more susceptible to getting damaged. And I also just like the clean look of being kind of inboarded. So that's what I'm going to shoot for. That's what I'm going to do next, just to kind of be able to keep moving here. I think I can use these shocks. I'll make them work, but I'm going to have to just change just a couple things. And then if I get those 16-inch shocks in the future, I can always just put them in. It's easy just to bolt in. But if I can make these shocks fit, then I can make any kind of air shocks fit in the future. Some of the reasons I wanted to go with air shocks is because they're just easier to package. This is an air shock coilover hybrid. So it's got an air shock inner that takes springs on the outside. And it kind of, you could make an argument either way. I've seen people with air shocks set up really well that ride really well in all conditions. The nice thing is with the coilover is if you blow your air shock, the inner, you still have the coil to at least get you around the rest of the day or get you home. And when you blow an air shock, you know, you're kind of done. So anyway, you could make a case for either one. Coilovers are kind of the safe, easy bet, but I've seen air shocks work really well and they're easier to package. So that's why I was going with air shocks, but everything's just too hard to get right now. So I want to keep moving forward, and I'm going to make these things fit so that I can kind of keep moving forward. Then if I get air shocks in the future, it'll be easy just to bolt right in. So as I'm flexing the suspension, the thing I have to watch out for is that this shock doesn't pull into the chassis right there too much. I could always use a grinder and cut that part of the chassis out, but I don't want to. What I'm gonna do is keep moving these forward this way, kind of keep that shock moved out. Now this is another thing I have to be aware of. On the side that's completely stuffed, I have to make sure that this tire isn't going to get anywhere near that shock. So when I put the tire on, I got to make sure that I don't move this too far forward, that all of a sudden it becomes bound up with the tire. So I'm going to pull a tire off, put it on there, and just make sure. So this is what happened. I tried to put the shocks here, and this is what happened. As I start to droop it out, the tire would definitely make contact with the shock, especially with springs on it. So that location's not going to work as well. So I got to figure something out. Everywhere I keep trying to put this isn't going to work. So gonna keep trying to figure out what I'm gonna do here. So just gonna keep trying different things. Also, one more thing I just wanted to explain. What am I doing here? So basically I've got this shock completely compressed, and then I droop out this other side, and then that kind of shows me when this side droops out, it kind of pulls this shock in towards the chassis more, and just kind of from the arc of the suspension flex. And this isn't getting all of the travel. What I have to do to get all of the travel, I have to hook my crane up and then lift this up a few more inches to get all the travel. But this gives me a pretty good idea. And when this all flexes, you can see how much this tire starts to get kind of closer to the chassis as well. So there's a lot of kind of things to take into consideration when trying to do this sort of thing. And I'm good on my control arms, and I was good on the chassis for as far as the tire is concerned. However, my shocks are the challenge right now, and so that's what I'm working on. If I just drooped out the suspension fully, both shocks are a long way away from hitting the chassis. It's not till you fully articulate it that one side pulls in. And that's the same issue I had with my other Rockcrawler as well. When you're setting up your driveline, when you fully droop it out, the driveline is straight and everything clears, but when you flex it one way or another, that's where it pulls the driveline kind of closer to the chassis, and you have to check the clearances. So one side fully drooped out and one side stuffed is how you can really kind of check all those clearances to make sure everything's going to clear. So that's what I'm doing right now, and just trying to make everything fit. I have a solution to this issue. So I'm tired of fighting this tube right here. This tube, everywhere I try to put these shocks, this tube continues to get in my way. So I've pretty much had it with that tube. So what I'm going to do, my plan for moving forward, I cut this tube out of the way. I'm going to put these shocks wherever I feel like it, the cleanest, easiest place to get to, and then I'm just going to go back and replace that tube. I might have to get out my bender and put a couple bends in it, but that's fine. But I'm just tired of trying to work around that tube, so that's my plan. I cut this piece out, I'm going to put the shocks where I want them, and then I will go back in and put this tube where it fits. So I'm still a little too close right here, so I'm going to cut this one more time, move it back one more time, and then I think I will have enough space there. Wow, it has been a pain trying to stuff these big 18-inch shocks into this spot. So what I do is I droop the suspension out fully. That's go all the way to the end of the stroke of the shock. Then I stuff the other side up all the way. So I use that jack with the block. I know it's a little sketchy right there. Just trying, nobody's working under there. And then I have to use my shop hoist to lift the chassis up high enough to get it to fully droop. So I stuff that shock all the way, then I turn my steering as far as it'll go right there to try and get the clearance I need right here, because I still got springs that need to fit there. So I'm going to move it back one more time and try that. All right, so I think I got it this time. I've got that much clearance. I move this back again, and I can stick my hand in there. That'll clear the springs, everything in there at full stuff. Now what I'm going to do is do the same thing to the other side, just move it back. Now I got my rear figured out on where I'm mounting the shocks. Now I got to figure out the front. And I'm afraid I'm going to have the same issue. That when I mount it right here, when it fully flexes, that it's going to pull the shock into this tube right here. So I may have to rework this tube as well. I guess we'll just find out. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to get the suspension flexed out. I'm going to grab, and then I also have to lift up on the front of this to get it just a little bit higher. So now I've got my front suspension drooped out. I've got my rear pretty much figured out where I want to put it. And so I got to figure out the front. I got to do the same thing. I got it drooped out. I still got to lift it up just a little bit higher to fully droop out these shocks, because these shocks they're so darn long. And you know, I could mount it out like this, but then, you know, your valve, your Schrader valve, is susceptible to, when you roll over, breaking it off. So it's nice to tuck it inside there so that you don't do that. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fully droop this thing out, go get the shocks I was just using, and try and figure out where I can mount these that the shock body won't hit this tube. And if it does hit the tube, then I have to chop the tube out and just kind of go from there. So here's the front suspension with just kind of the drive line just setting in there. So you can see it's going to be a pretty tight fit, but good thing this is a high pinion. As we kind of fit back there, it's going to go about like that is where the two-piece is going to go. And I also have to really watch this doing my exhaust tubing. It's all going to be very tight right there. Not a big deal. I make it all fit. But yes, it's going to be tight. With this front one, more than likely, I'm just going to limit it out and just not use all of the travel, because I wasn't planning on using shocks this big. But I think it'll be all right. And here's with the suspension drooped out with the drive line kind of going up in there. That's why it looks like it'll clear everything. Everything will be fine. But it's definitely going to be tight up in there. For example, that's kind of where it pops out there. That'll be a two-piece. That goes from the transfer case all the way to right there. It'll be all right. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use a skinnier drive line than that as well. So it looks like everything will clear all right. So these are my rock sliders. What these are going to do is I'm going to slide them right in here. I'm going to slide them right in there, and then I'm going to hammer it on in. We machine these down a little bit, but it's still kind of a snug fit. But what I'm going to do is hammer these in so that when I hit rocks, that the tube can't cave in. It'll protect that from getting all smashed up. My other buggy, I should have done the same thing on, because it got kind of smashed up. And when I go to fix my other one, I might end up doing that. So anyway, this keeps the tube from collapsing. I'm at. Basically, I ended up changing the lines right down here from just going straight up to there to kind of flat and then down. And some of the reasons for that is because the shocks when fully flexed, this shock's nearly straight up and down, gets too close to the frame here with these coilovers. So that's what I'm gonna try and run with, and if these are too long and it's sitting up too high, it'll be very easy to swap out to shorter shocks so it sits lower. I've got a ton of room to work with. Overall, that's not gonna be much different than the ride height. It still sits pretty low, so I think it'll be all right. So what I'm doing here, I was originally going to put a radiator in the front. I've just decided to change my mind when kind of redoing this, because that'll give me plenty of room for the winch right there, and then there's not that much in front of the motor. It doesn't get too crowded. And what I'm doing is I've cut these pieces of tube. I'm gonna put a piece of plate in here and weld this tube shut. Then this tube will go like this. And I will put a little inlet where the radiator fluid will go to the radiator, and then back through the other side through this tube right here. I've seen other people do it that way, and it works pretty slick. And another reason I decided to change to a rear radiator is it's kind of nice on those cold nights. You can just put a reversing switch and then basically blow the hot air back on you like a heater. So that'd be kind of nice. There's plenty of room right there in the back for a radiator. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna mount it back there. So yeah, I'm going to go with the fuel cell right here. I kind of changed up the back lines too. If I were to do this again, I wouldn't get in such a hurry to do these bottom lines. Like, you can do the top lines real easy, but the bottom lines are where you run into trouble with trying to fit the shocks and fit everything else. So kind of a lessons learned for me, if I were doing it again, is to leave the bottom ones alone until you fitted your shocks and everything like that, and then put those in there. So kind of learned my lesson there, but not a big deal just to go and change a few tubes. And then so I've got my pieces of aluminum pounded into these rock sliders so they cannot collapse at all when I'm sliding against the rocks. That's going to work out well. I just got to weld the caps on the end. I've got caps just like these for all of the tubes, so there won't be any open tubes anywhere. Everything will be capped off, and just trying to get everything fit in there. So making a little bit of progress. This video is kind of one step forward, two steps back, but in the end it'll be a better product than what I was kind of going towards at first. So sometimes you start putting everything in there, and then you just kind of see that maybe that's not the best way and just kind of change it up. So this way is going to work all right, I think. So yeah, just going to keep chipping away. We're getting ready to go to Moab here, so my next videos will be hopefully about wheeling and the races and stuff in Moab. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and this will just be sitting here waiting for me when I get back. And then I'm going to keep continuing with this, get the radiator in place, get those lines plumbed up, and then my Atlas transfer case should be here soon, so I can get that in place, and then get my exhaust and drive lines and all that kind of stuff. I also found some seats. I got some seats for a really good deal off Facebook Marketplace. Got some nice Corbeau seats, so things are kind of starting to come together. And hopefully I'll just keep chipping away.